This isn't Paris, but it looks just like it. Cobblestone streets, Haussmann-style balconies, tree-lined boulevards, and a 354-foot Eiffel Tower piercing the sky, all sitting not in France, but in the heart of China. Welcome to Tianducheng, a surreal residential development designed to mirror the French capital with eerie accuracy. At first glance, you'd think it's a high-end movie set or a themed resort, but it's neither. People actually live here, around 30,000 of them. The attention to detail goes beyond just architecture. Even the street signs, benches, and fountains were modeled after real locations in Paris. But this isn't a tourist attraction. It was built as a functioning neighborhood, meant to blend European charm with Chinese ambition. The result? A quiet, polished shell of a city that raises one big question. Why recreate Paris in the suburbs of Hangzhou? Tianducheng isn't an isolated experiment. It's part of a much bigger pattern. Just a couple hours away sits a city modeled after London, complete with red phone booths, cobbled streets, and even a Thames River look-alike. And it doesn't stop there. In various corners of China, you'll find neighborhoods that mimic the charm of Switzerland, the canals of Amsterdam, the elegance of Vienna, and even the medieval vibe of Germany's old towns. These aren't just themed districts or novelty parks. They're fully built urban spaces meant to function as real communities. Some have imported materials, others hired foreign architects, and all of them were built with the idea that blending Western aesthetics with Chinese development could lead to prosperity. From British pubs to Dutch windmills, China has created an entire catalog of Europe without ever leaving Asia. But how did this architectural remix get started? The story begins in the early 2000s with an ambitious urban plan called One City, Nine Towns. Spearheaded by Shanghai's former mayor and backed by the city's planning commission, the idea was simple: relieve the pressure on Shanghai's overcrowded center by building themed towns in the suburbs. But not just any towns. These would be full-scale replicas of iconic Western cities. Each was assigned a different country to emulate: England, Spain, Sweden, Italy, and more. The goal was to attract middle-class families with the promise of a high-end lifestyle, while also drawing in tourism and foreign investment. On paper, it was genius. Combine urban expansion with European luxury. But choosing to mimic the West wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about branding. These towns were designed to signal wealth, global openness, and modernization. China wasn't just copying Europe. It was trying to sell a new version of itself. These towns weren't built on a whim. They were massive financial undertakings. Some had budgets stretching from $200 million to nearly $1 billion. Developers spared no expense. In Thamestown, modeled after Britain, even the street lamps were imported from the UK. Statues of Winston Churchill, Princess Diana, and even Harry Potter lined the squares. The plan was clear: generate buzz, attract wealthy buyers, and turn these replicas into tourist magnets. And at first, it worked. Media coverage was intense. Investors rushed in, buying up properties at sky-high prices, convinced they were getting in early on the next big boom. For a moment, it looked like the perfect fusion of novelty and strategy. But behind the headlines and photo ops, there was a problem no one wanted to talk about. These cities were easy to build, but much harder to fill. And the dream was already starting to crack. Despite the hype, many of these towns fell flat. Streets meant to buzz with life stayed eerily quiet. The grand facades and imported charm couldn't hide one glaring issue: no one was moving in. Properties were bought up as investments, not homes. Wealthy buyers treated them as portfolio pieces, not places to live. As a result, entire neighborhoods became architectural ghost towns, pristine, photogenic, and almost entirely empty. In places like Thamestown, shops struggled. businesses folded, and the dream of a thriving European-style suburb quietly faded. The high price tags didn't help. Middle-class families couldn't afford to live there, and the ultra-rich had no reason to. With no residents to support local economies, these towns became frozen in time, expensive monuments to misplaced optimism. What was once hailed as the future of urban living had become a real estate illusion. And it wasn't the only misstep. One of the most striking failures came from a Swedish-inspired town called Luodian. Designed to mirror the charm of Sigtuna, Sweden's oldest town, developers even hired a Swedish architecture firm to ensure authenticity. But that attention to detail backfired. The foreign layout clashed with local customs. Specifically, it ignored feng shui, a critical element in Chinese design philosophy. Investors hesitated, and those who did buy started demolishing parts of the town just to realign buildings with feng shui principles. The result? A chaotic, mismatched landscape of Scandinavian exteriors and haphazard renovations. Instead of drawing interest, the authenticity alienated potential residents. Luodian wasn't alone. Other towns faced similar pushback, not because they looked bad, but because they didn't feel Chinese. What was meant to be an upscale cultural blend ended up as an awkward transplant, and that tension between East and West would only grow louder with time. As these European clones popped up across China, the reactions from their real-world counterparts were anything but consistent. In some cases, like Thamestown, the imitation was seen as bizarre, even insulting. Anthony McKay, a consultant involved in the project, later called it a comical facade. Critics argued that copying Western architecture without context stripped it of meaning, turning history into decoration. Others, however, saw opportunity. When a near-exact replica of the Austrian town Hallstatt was unveiled in Guangdong province, built at a staggering cost of $940 million, many Austrians were outraged at first. But their mayor, Alexander Scheutz, took a different stance. He embraced it, attending the opening ceremony and using it to strengthen ties with China. That kind of diplomatic optimism wasn't universal, but it showed a strange truth. For some, imitation sparked offense. For others, it opened doors. Either way, the world was watching and reacting. Eventually, even the Chinese government started raising eyebrows. A national survey revealed that over 400,000 villages had replaced traditional names with Western-sounding ones, a shift that alarmed officials. The concern wasn't just aesthetic, it was cultural. In response, China's State Council and the Communist Party released a directive banning architecture deemed oversized, xenocentric, and weird. The message was clear. The era of copycat cities was over. President Xi Jinping doubled down, publicly criticizing strange architecture and calling for a return to Chinese traditions. Gated communities, a hallmark of many replica towns, were also banned. What started as a show of global ambition was now being recast as a threat to national identity. The government's stance marked a turning point. These cities, once symbols of modernization and wealth, were now cautionary tales. And suddenly, China's obsession with Europe didn't look like pride. It looked like a problem. So why did China build these strange, silent cities in the first place? It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about transformation. After decades under strict communist rule, where creativity was suppressed and architecture was reduced to gray concrete blocks, the country was ready to reinvent itself. The reopening of the Shanghai Stock Exchange in 1990 signaled a new era of capitalism, ambition, and global trade. With money flooding in and restrictions loosening, developers went wild. Imitating iconic European cities became a status symbol, proof that China could match or even outdo the West. These buildings weren't just homes, They were trophies, a declaration that China had arrived. But behind the grand facades and lavish budgets was something more fragile, a nation searching for identity in the middle of rapid change. And in that rush to look global, something uniquely Chinese was left behind, at least for a while.